Welcome to Market Overtime, special coverage of NVIDIA's latest earnings report. I'm Diane King Hall. The AI chip maker and semiconductor heavyweight just released its first quarter results for fiscal 2026. And it's a report investors, traders, and beyond were eagerly anticipating. In this episode, we'll hear from seasoned market veterans offering in-depth takeaways and the need-to-know insights on all things NVIDIA and the broader AI landscape. First up, let's welcome in Rebecca Walser, President, Walser Wealth Management. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me, Diane. Thank you.
All right, let's start out with taking a look at this quarter. Look, NVIDIA reported earnings on an adjusted basis of 81 cents a share. Revenue topped 44 billion, so it had strong growth on both metrics. The street seemed to like the guidance. Does the reaction make sense to you?
I do think so, and I think the guidance it's really all of what the CEO said, right? He really set expectations. So really the EPS before the charge on the H20, so basically let's set the stage. We know that there is a ban basically on the H20, and basically the CEO said they couldn't further reduce or modify that to make it usable, so that has to be an $8 billion write-off. They took 4.5 this quarter, they'll do the rest later in segments, but that's why the earnings per share went from the 90 plus to the 81 cents, and I think investors can understand this is outside of the company's parlance. They have no control and ability, and I think the broader message is look that we beat earnings even with these headwinds. I mean, China was only 12.1% of their revenue in this last quarter, and then you compare that to the previous two quarters at 14 and 15%, you can see the diminution of China. And China's going to keep going forward with their AI and their supercomputers. This is probably make them more innovative instead of trying to just steal all of our IP, but they'll still figure out a way to do it. We saw the stuff that happened in January with DeepSeek, and we know that that's an issue. So I think that overall, this is the kind of the grandfather of the AI super chip, right? And they are letting us know that even in the face of the headwinds of tariffs and not being able to sell into China, we're still going to beat revenue and we're still going to have really good earnings.
Yeah, it does sound like that they are still going to beat. But in terms of how Jensen's comments were with regard to flagging, wanting to clearly still have a presence there, it sounds like he still didn't love the idea that the export controls are there and the fact that it gives China a stronger ability to increase their own footprint there, especially when you think about Huawei.
Yeah, I was thinking of his comments. I mean, he basically said that China is essentially closed to the United States, and that is a sentiment that is problematic. But I like the sentiment and tone overall, his tonality when he's talking about, look, we have all these things, the autonomous vehicle partnerships that we're doing, 320 different companies they're working with, whether they're auto manufacturers or tier one suppliers to auto manufacturers, to integrate their chip technology into this new autonomous vehicle industry, which really, Diane, I think is going to take us in the next 2 years. I was in Phoenix recently and just literally went to a parking lot. Like they're being literally tested all throughout the city, but there was a second company basically that has hundreds of vehicles sitting and ready to be deployed. Tesla is obviously doing autonomous taxis in the Houston or the Austin market. So there's a lot of AI that we don't even realize in sectors that's going to be coming up. We just think of data, cloud computing, we think of these supercomputers, and that is all great. But what I thought his comments really spoke to is this is really the evolution of AI, and this is going to be in everything and everywhere, and we're going to be okay.
Everything and everywhere. Look, you still have a big driver when you think about the hyperscalers, the Microsofts of the world, Google Cloud. Those are massive buyers. AWS. It seems like a large portion of his business still hinges on that, especially when you think about data center revenue, which saw a huge surge there. What does that tell you about the kind of demand picture for NVIDIA?
It just, again, speaks to what I'm exactly saying, is that the breadth and the depth is very wide and very deep, and it's not just going to be about selling chips to China. I think that they're doing their goal is to do 72,000 Blackwell GPUs weekly. Microsoft has already deployed tens of thousands, and Microsoft is saying we're going to need hundreds of thousands. Now, where all of this energy is coming from to support all this, I don't know. I would seriously suggest investing in utilities and some kind of new energy energy, but the fact that they have the Mag 7 and they have hyperscalers to that level lets us know that their demand is really broad. It is not just the supercomputers that would, or the computing power that could come from China.
Okay, so is Blackwell, in your view, really the biggest generator of a growth for NVIDIA?
I mean, I don't know. I think that, there are going to be things that are going to be less necessary, not such supercomputing power. But then they're talking about the ultra Blackwell coming out later this year, and that's going to have the ability to basically increase the token throughput by 25x. So that is they're in every nick and cranny of this market, and I think that they thought that China was going to be a bigger in play, and maybe it will. They did mention potentially opening an actual manufacturing plant in China to circumvent the tariff policy if it comes out.
Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to figure out a way that they could address the hole that's been created by the export controls when it comes to the H20 chip. Do you see them finding a path forward there?
I mean, it's going to be difficult because, as a U.S. multinational corporation that has tariff policy implemented, you would really have to bifurcate. Maybe, it's a subsidiary, but it's still connected. So it's going to be difficult to get their technology manufactured in China when it's IP protected in America with tariffs. But as you know, we saw the Federal Trade Court basically coming down on the administration saying you don't have the authority under this particular law. We fully expect the administration to go out to other laws, other sections of laws that give authorization for tariffs. There's another section that allows up to 50% tariffs. But again, that all remains to be seen. It is going to be difficult if there is an outright ban, like there is on the H20, basically, as we've been talking about. If there's an outright American ban, it is going to be difficult for them. They're going to have to really thread that needle legally very, very carefully. And they don't want to jeopardize, like we just talked about, all of their Mag 7, all of their hyperscalers, and all of that revenue that is really gives them so much breadth and depth.
Okay, a lot of the sell-side communities are adjusting their price targets off the back of these earnings for NVIDIA. I saw several different, more bullish views on it now, re-rating the stock higher than where it has been. It's made Citigroup raising their price target to $180 a share. They are buy. Morgan Stanley is overweight on NVIDIA. They've raised their price target to $170 a share. The analyst community is still largely bullish on NVIDIA. At the same time, I hear some talk that it may be the valuation is starting to heat up. It's made quite the recovery this year, given the troubles that it faced. You mentioned DeepSeek earlier this year, but over the past month or so, it's certainly made a turnaround. Now, at the time of our taping this interview, it is outperforming the S&P 500. Do you think this is sustainable?
So I would say in a world where all things are positive and we keep just growing and having kind of normal economic, situations, yes. However, I do see such global macroeconomic headwinds coming, and I think that's going to affect the economy in general. Like, when you see kind of the balance of the world, I wouldn't say de-dollarizing, but I would say moving away from the West and towards the East, the BRICS bloc, the Belt and Road Initiative, all the things that we have seen that China has sort of orchestrated. And there's a lot of things that people don't even understand about, the blockchain technology on Enbridge that China has taken over from the World Bank. Those kinds of things really are indicative of countries moving to the East, away from the West, and that gives us a lot of global macro headwinds on economic activity. This is why you saw oil drop, because before, when the tariff policies came into effect, it's like global demand is going to drop, global shipping is going to drop, all these things are dropping. So if you had sort of just a normalized last 10 years, not talking about the global financial crisis, just last 10 years of normal economic cycles, I think NVIDIA is going to have an unmitigated runway up. Absolutely, because there is just not a direct competitor that has the technology foundation that they have built. There just isn't. And they can't get to that level without billions and billions of investment and a lot of infrastructure investment. So that's why they're poised to win. However, they still have to deal with the macroeconomic global situation as everyone else, and that could really be a headwind for them.
I know you talked about the headwinds, but I'm curious to know your thought about global potential tailwinds. NVIDIA if they've made this investment in Saudi Arabia. They made that big trip with Jensen Huang, making that big trip along with the president, with thousands of chips going over there. What's your view on that potentially being a tailwind?
I mean, I think the Middle East deals are another just a huge positive win, and it helps, you know, diminish the Chinese impact a little bit to let us know, hey, there's, like I said, the breadth is wide. They've got the autonomous vehicles, they've got the hyperscalers, they've got Mag 7, they've got, and now the Middle East deals. I mean, just the increase in revenue year over year from, you know, 26 billion last year, this quarter, to 44 billion, it is phenomenal. And to your point, it was 7 billion the year before, it was 26 billion. So we're talking about, you know, a 4x almost in 1 year, and then almost a 2x in the next year. So is this sustainable? I don't want investors to get ahead of their skis and think that this is a God company and they cannot do anything wrong. We saw with the H20 how things can have an impact, and we know that. But no, I do not see a competitor that is going to be able to get up in their face and bring them a real, you know, it's like they're one of one. They are one of one.
Well, the view was that AMD would be closer number 2 than it has been. What's your thought on that?
I mean, I just don't know that they are going to be able to scale and create the infrastructure, even though they're a massive company themselves, that NVIDIA has put into these GPUs.
Okay, and then I want to go back to the thoughts that you have about China. You know, you make a great point about in terms of what the competitive landscape looks like here, but obviously China is going to try to address that hole that the export controls creates. And as we know, CEO Jensen Huang has come out swinging with regard to his views on that. He thinks that the U.S. policy is misguided on this front, and he thinks that it actually would help Chinese rivals. What's your view on that? Do you agree with his take?
I mean, I thought his take was really interesting because basically what he's saying is what you're doing is unleashing the dragon, right? And you're basically saying we're not going to provide this for you, so you're going to have to figure it out yourselves. And we know how China is with IP theft. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. They are IP stealers, and so you know the DeepSeek I think was such a shock to everybody because they thought how, and of course the $5 million he said that it cost them. That everyone has discounted that and said that is just not true. That is China coming out and trying to say, oh look what we did. We got your technology and we only did it for $5 million. So everyone understands that that was not a true number and that it's a lot higher than that. But it is just showing you, and I don't mean to speak to you know, of a country this way, but I think it's nefarious. It's nefarious intent to say, look, either we're gonna get it the right way or we're gonna get it anyway, and you're not gonna have the profits for it. And I don't think that CEO Jensen is off in his sentiment that this is a country that will stop at nothing to be number one. And if they see that AI is the way it's coming, they will go after that. And so I don't think he's wrong. I do think if you bring them into the fold and can control with controls and actual verification of what information and IP they have, then that is better than saying, we're excluding you, and then they're left to their own devices to do who knows what. And they're very, very strategic. They have been more strategic than us for 100 years, and they will continue to be if we don't get our stuff together in America.
Okay, so how should investors factor in that kind of thinking and that viewpoint? And the headwinds when it comes to what development China may do?
I think that we just cannot look at NVIDIA as the God company. It can very easily have a God complex. Investors get over their skis and just get so excited, and then they think, this is great. I can just ride the AI wave and retire in 2 years. Maybe if you time it just right.
We would all love to retire in 2 years.
Right? Maybe, but much more likely that China is going to figure out their circumvention of what American policy is and make it work for them no matter what. So we just have to recognize that no matter what kind of trade sanctions and you know, restrictions that America puts in place, China is going to do their best to circumvent that in any way they can.
I'm curious to know from you, what else stood out to you in this most recent report, whether it was in the data itself or on the earnings call? I mean, I think one of the huge standouts to me is obviously the data center revenue.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge surge
that was
there,
it.
up more than 70%. So that's one of the things that stood out to you.
Yeah.
But I also found that, you know, even the fact that gaming, their origins increased.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's a much smaller component now, but what did you like the most?
I think that I really liked that, Jensen was really expressing that their goal is really to keep a 70% growth in profit margins, and that is they're aiming for that. That is massive. What other companies?
It is massive. Do you think it's realistic?
No.
Okay.
No, but I love that he had the chutzpah to say it.
Okay, so why don't you think it's realistic?
Well, because you have threats like China that will steal IP, that will come over here and set up shell corporations and buy your supercomputers and reverse engineer everything that you've got going on with their intellectual property that they have, which is also massive. Like, we just aren't, in a silo in this world. And I think that's his point. Like, this is a global world. These are global interconnected functioning things. Microsoft is in all of these companies are multinational companies. And to try to pretend that one country can restrict the kind of economic growth that is organically coming to the world is really ridiculous.
Do you think investors are underestimating the impact of those China's export controls, or those export controls on chips going to China, and the impact to development that China can do as a competitive threat for an NVIDIA
I think
or the
absolutely.
whole AI chip space?
I think absolutely. And I think DeepSeek, unfortunately, China tries to they get ahead of their skis and they try to make it sound like, oh, it was so easy and we did it for 5 million. So people discount that and then don't believe it. But the message was clear. We will get this technology, however, bed, bar, steel, whatever we have to do, we will get this technology and we will make it ourselves and we will make it for cheaper.
But do you think, look, okay, we know that there's some back and forth happening right now with regard to how much of tariff policy can be implemented. But it looks like, at least when it comes to certain tariff policy, it can. So, I know that you're saying that they would use nefarious tactics, but if there's tight enough controls, how could it get there? One, yes, they obviously would be a race to develop their own things, but you have the advantage of time on your side when it comes to NVIDIA. And
right.
Is there something to be said for that?
I think so. First to market is always. Look at Google. They've dominated, even though search engine is going away because ChatGPT and all of these other Grok and all these other things are people are using AI now to actually do their get more interactive research going than just a basic Boolean search of Google. So you can see that is on Google's side has really come down, but then they're coming up on the AI side, on the AI front, and their investments in research and development. So I think that China is going to get what they want, but I am pro-America, and I want NVIDIA to have the ability to have the longest runway possible to reap the benefits of the investment that they made legitimately. So every American wants that for a company that really did things the right way. But China is such a threat, and that's why Trump is doing this. Let's be honest. He's saying, look, we can't live in a world where we create everything and then another country just takes it and steals it and monetizes it. That's not possible. So he's doing his best to fix this, but it is really difficult. And even our own country fights against him with our own courts saying, no, you can't do that. So, if we can't have any protectionism, then what will make a company make this kind of massive infrastructure investment? We need massive infrastructure into R&D, into drugs. If they can be just taken and cheaply made elsewhere, what is going to make U.S. companies do that?
I'm curious to know your thoughts on the Mag 7's performance this year. They've certainly made quite a recovery.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been the outperformers that we saw, for instance, last year.
Yeah.
What's your view? Do you think they'll reclaim that pole position?
I do think that I'm happy with the results this year. I'm happy to see that, okay, we can get back to some sort of normalcy of what our expectation is for their future performance. But again, this is what I'm talking about with NVIDIA. You can't look at the Mag 7 as they're the solution to all of our problems. Even if you look at the breadth of the market last year, was pretty much Mag 7. That's a problem. We can't have the entire equity market relying on how 7 companies are performing, and 7 companies are really in the AI and IP space. That's really what they do. Software, technology. It's pretty scary to think. Now, the good news is as AI becomes more and more and more in our everyday lives, it will bring up utilities, it will bring up energy, it will bring up other sectors with it. It's going to change every sector that we know, and that's the scary part that people don't realize. I was just talking about John Deere and their autonomous move to vehicles, a 188-year-old company telling farmers that they can go to football games on Friday nights because all of their products can run the farm without them. And I think that's great, but then you start to think, well, then do I even have a job
Right.
anymore? So it's like we really have to understand that this AI is a fourth industrial revolution, transformational change across everything we do. And it's important that we have some level of protection for the companies that make that massive infrastructure investment into R&D investment in our own country.
All right, we'll have to leave our conversation there. And we are the non-AI versions right now, but one day our digital twins
That's
may
right.
be talking to each
That's
other.
right.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Diane. Thank
That's
you.
Rebecca Walser, president of Walser Wealth Management.